White Sox Only by Evelyn Coleman, illustrated by Tyrone Getter. This is a good book to introduce segregation, talk about racism, and it definitely kept me guessing as to what was going to happen. I didn't expect what happens in this book to happen, actually. And if I were to read this to a specific age group, I would say either 3rd or 4th grade. But in all honesty, I think it could be used for any grade. Grandma, can I walk into town by myself? I asked one hot summer's day. I knew what she was going to say. She was going to tell a story. But not just any story. My favorite story. I watched her turn toward her spit can. Ding! Snuff juice hit the bottom, sounding like a chime. She rocked 1 or 2 times, her eyes closed, and then looking up at me. You know you ain't big enough to walk into no town alone, girl. I sure don't know why you keep asking me that. You ain't big enough till you gon' do some good there. I smiled, plopped down on the step. She was about to begin her story. Grandma laughed. You know, when I was a little girl like herself, I sneaked into town once. Yep, all by myself. I wasn't planning on doing no good. Had just been waiting for a scorching hot day. I had 2 eggs hid in my pockets. Not to eat, mind you, but to see if what folks said was true. I slipped on my finest Sunday dress and my shiny black patent leather shoes and my clean white socks. I pulled my plaits back into a bow. Why, I thought I looked pretty grown up. Lord, you should have seen me strutting, the dust flying behind me. I had to hold my arms steady on account of them eggs, though. Now that I was thinking about it, it must have been a mighty funny sight. I sneaked up on that road a-singing, jump back, Sally, 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 walking up the alley, 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 to nobody but myself. And child, was it hot. On that kind of a day, a firecracker might have light up by itself. I was feeling pretty fine until I spotted that old chicken man sitting on his front porch with his mouth like a smile. I just looked down at the dirt my mama had told me how that chicken man still did things he knowed all the way from Africa. Stuff that his grandmother done taught him. Mama also had told me he could heal the sick by the laying on his hands. And that one time he made a blind man see just by looking deep into his eyes. And folks said he turned people into chickens if he didn't feel that what they were doing was right. That's why he was called the Chicken Man. I was kind of scared he might think I wasn't doing right, so I started walking faster. I held my arms out steady though, so I wouldn't break the eggs. This would be a good time to talk to the kids about where they think Africa is, maybe show it on a map, and have a guess where he might actually be from. Anyway, when I got to town, I didn't see many folk that I knew. I wandered around with my mouth gaped open, looking at the white women and their fancy hats. That's when I saw Mama's friend, Miss Nancy, turning the corner. I was going to show enough be in trouble if she saw me. She told Mama everything. So I took off running toward the first big tree I saw and I hid behind it. I stayed there for a minute, panting, until I saw Miss Nancy walk out of sight. Then I tiptoed out. But in my rush, I bust one of my eggs, and it was slinking down my dress and my legs. I figured I'd better do what I come to do and get back home. I was standing in front of this big old building where there was a statue of a soldier sitting up on a horse. I read what it said on the building. Cole County Courthouse, Mississippi. I carefully pulled my egg out of my pocket. Right there. I cracked it. One time against the horse's leg. Give the kids a second to laugh about that because I'm sure they will. The egg's insides dropped onto the hot cement. I knelt down with my face close. I watched that egg like the old man watched the checkers before making a move. For a minute, I thought it wasn't going to do nothing. Then, right around the edges, I saw one little bit was turning white. Next, the white creeped wider, and the yellow began to bubble. By golly, I was frying an egg on the cement, just like those folks said. I jumped up and started dancing and a-prancing. It was time to go home now. I'd done it. It was all over, and it was true. It could get so hot that you could fry an egg on the sidewalk. In case you can't see it, there's the egg. I started walking and wiping sweat from my face, with the eggy part of my dress sticking to my leg, sticking to me every time I took a step. My mouth was dry as dirt, and I was mighty thirsty. That's when I spotted the water fountain. It had a little step stool so children could climb up on to drink. But on the fountain, there was a sign that said whites only. Well, I knew what that meant. So I sat down in the grass, took off my shiny black patent leather shoes. Now I only had on my clean white socks. I stepped up on the stool with those white socks hugging my feet. As you can see, white socks right there. I was slurping up that water mighty fast when this big white man with a black and white bandana around his neck grabbed me off the stool and pushed me to the ground. The white man pointed at the sign and yelled at me, "Can't you read, girl? Well, I'm going to whoop you till you can't sit down." His big fingers fumbled and tugged at his belt. I began to cry as a crowd of white people gathered around. They were all staring at me. Seeing all the people made me real scared, and I cried louder. I couldn't understand what the man was so mad about. I was wearing my white socks. Good point to make with the students is that maybe you should be more specific on signs and not just say whites only, as it's not very clear as to what it means by whites only. An old black woman from my church stepped through the crowd. She wasn't wearing anything white, but she untied her shoes and took them off. She stepped up to the fountain, bent way down, and took a drink. I knew the man was going to yell at her, and he did. "I'm going to have to whoop you too, ain't I?" he shouted. But then other black folks started coming over, removing their shoes and drinking from the fountain. They had on clean-looking green socks and yellow socks and red socks and blue socks. Of course, the big man with the bandana kept right on yelling. His face got red as fire. He was snorting through his nose like a bull when it's going charge. Maybe have a small little talk about why bulls charge at the color red, if need be. Other white folk came up and started yelling at us too. By that time, the big man had whipped off his belt off his pants. He was hitting me and everybody else who was close. None of the black people moved. They just covered their faces. I sat there sobbing, holding my arms over my head. All of a sudden, everybody got quiet, like they was going to pray in church. Even the white people. I peeped out through my arms. The black people and the white people were moving aside. The chicken man was coming. He was slowly tapping his way toward me. When he got close, he stopped, looked at me from the top of his head down to my white socks, bent over and pulled off his black shoes, his face squeezing up. He had on the cleanest white socks you have ever seen. He stepped up on the stool. He didn't have to bend over very far because he was short. He drank a long time from that fountain. I held my breath. So did everyone else. The chicken man lifted his head. He turned around, smiling, and slowly stepped down off the stool without a word. He pointed a crooked finger at the white man. The white man's belt was down by his side, clasped tightly in his fist. He was as still as a statue. Maybe see if there's any other synonyms or phrases that kids could use that still as a statue. It's hard as a rock, stuff like that. See what they come up with to compare to that. The old chicken man helped me up. He took out a white handkerchief, wiped off my face. There now, child. It's time for you to go on home. You did all right. He handed me a chicken feather out of the brim of his hat and hobbled away. All the black people surrounded me. They were all crying and hugging me. Then they took me home. When they told Mama what happened, she just broke out laughing. She said, "Well, I guess you can go to town by yourself now, 'cause you're old enough to do some good." Nobody ever saw that big white man again, the man who had whipped us. None of us dared ask about the big chicken flapping around the courthouse near the water fountain either. And from then on, the whites only sign was gone from that water fountain forever. The end. Definitely think this is a good book to read. Has a nice comical twist there with the White Sox. As that's how the girl took it. She thought you just had to wear white socks to get a drink, not that it was for white people only. Good to use this, maybe have kids predict what they think is going to happen next in spots where it's getting a little intense, and just to see what they're thinking, because obviously what I was thinking that's not what I was expecting to happen. It went from talking about egg frying on the sidewalk to the girl getting a drink from the water fountain, and I don't know, it was just a good book.